Blood dripped from the edge of the kitchen counter, pooling on the white tile floor. Emily Hayes stood frozen, the knife still in her trembling hands. Across the room, her mother-in-law, Margaret, lay motionless, her head at an unnatural angle. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Emily's heart pounded, not because she had killed anyone, but because she knew exactly what this would look like. On the counter beside her was a glass of red wine, tipped over, its contents spilled toward a small, leather-bound notebook. Emily had never seen it before, but the open page of words scrawled in shaky handwriting. If anything happens to me, Emily is to blame. The front door burst open. Officers rushed in, guns raised. Emily's voice cracked as she tried to speak, but no one was listening. They pulled her hands behind her back, the metal cuffs biting into her wrists. She had given up her career to care for this woman, moved into her home, cooked her meals, bathed her, and now she was standing in the middle of a scene that screamed murderer. Her mind raced. Margaret had planned this. But why? And how could she prove it before the whole world turned against her? When Emily Hayes walked out of her office for the last time, she told herself it was worth it. She had been a project manager at a marketing firm in Columbus, Ohio. Good pay, decent benefits. But her husband, Ryan, had looked at her with pleading eyes and said, "Mom needs you." Margaret Hayes, 68, had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis and early-stage heart failure. She couldn't get around without help, and Ryan worked long hours as an electrician. Emily had always been the caring one, the one who checked on neighbors and volunteered shelters. So she packed up her desk, hugged her coworkers goodbye, and told herself this was a noble sacrifice. The first few weeks were fine, almost peaceful. Emily set up a routine: breakfast at 8, medication at 9, light exercises before lunch. Margaret didn't say much, but Emily chalked it up to her being in pain. Then came the comments. Small at first. "You put too much salt in the soup." "I liked the living room better before you rearranged it." "Ryan never would have married you if you didn't play the sweet girl." Emily swallowed the hurt and carried on. Caring for an elderly, sick woman wasn't supposed to be easy. But things began to shift in a way Emily couldn't ignore. One night, she walked into the living room to find Margaret on the phone. She stopped speaking the moment she saw Emily and hung up. Emily thought she heard her say, "She'll mess up eventually." It wasn't just the phone calls. Emily started noticing little things out of place. Margaret's jewelry missing and then mysteriously reappearing, prescription bottles with the caps loosened, even Ryan's watch found under Emily's pillow. When Emily told Ryan, he frowned. "Babe, she's sick. Don't make up stuff." That sentence hurt worse than any insult Margaret had thrown at her. The breaking point came one chilly November evening. Emily had just made dinner. Pot roast, Margaret's favorite. Ryan was working late again. As she set the table, Margaret looked up from her seat and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was sly, almost triumphant. "I hope you know," Margaret said, "that no one will believe you when the time comes." Emily felt the hairs on her arms rise. "What are you talking about?" Margaret just chuckled, spearing a carrot with her fork. "You'll see." That night, Emily barely slept. She had the uneasy feeling that something was building, that Margaret was slowly putting something in motion. She couldn't have imagined how quickly it would all explode. 2 days later, Emily found herself in the kitchen, hearing the sickening thud of a body hitting the floor. And this time, she was standing right over it when the police arrived. The flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of the Hayes kitchen in frantic color. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears as 2 uniformed officers burst in, followed closely by a tall man in a gray suit and a woman with a badge clipped to her blazer. "Ma'am, step away from the body," the male officer barked, his hand hovering near his gun. Emily stumbled back, her voice shaking. "I didn't do this. She just—" "Hands where we can see them," the woman officer cut her off. Cold metal pressed into her wrists as the cuffs clicked shut. Emily's heart dropped to her stomach. She wanted to explain, but the detective's eyes already held suspicion. Detective Mark Fallon, the man in the gray suit, knelt beside Margaret's body. His movements were calm, methodical, but Emily saw his brow furrow as he took in the scene. the tipped glass of wine, the blood, and the open notebook on the counter. Detective Sarah Vega, the woman with the badge, glanced from the notebook to Emily. "This yours?" Emily shook her head frantically. "No, I've never seen it before." Sarah read aloud from the page, her voice low but firm. "If anything happens to me, Emily Hayes is to blame." Emily's knees buckled. "That's not true. She must have, she..." Fallon's eyes met Vega's, and something unspoken passed between them. Vega stood and motioned to the officers. "Get her in the car." Outside, the crisp Ohio air bit at Emily's face. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains and across porches, phones in hand, recording. Her cheeks burned, not from the cold, but from the humiliation. She could almost hear the headlines forming. "Devoted daughter-in-law turns killer." As she was guided into the back of the cruiser, she caught sight of Ryan pulling into the driveway. His work boots hit the gravel hard as he ran toward the house. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. Emily's voice cracked. "Ryan, it's not what it looks like. She..." But Vega stepped in front of him, holding up a hand. "Sir, we need you to stay back. Your wife is a suspect in a homicide investigation." Ryan froze, his eyes darting from Emily to the gurney rolling toward the ambulance. His mother's body was zipped inside the black bag. His face twisted, confusion, grief, and something colder. Emily's chest tightened. She had expected shock, maybe anger, but she hadn't expected him to look like he might believe it. At the station, they placed her in a small, windowless interrogation room. A metal table, 2 chairs, and the hum of a flickering light above her. Her hand shook as Fallon and Vega walked in, setting down a thick manila folder. Vega leaned forward. "Emily, here's your chance to tell us everything. The sooner we understand what happened, the better for you." Emily swallowed hard. "She framed me. I know it sounds insane, but Margaret, she hated me. She said no one would believe me. And now this." Fallon flipped open the folder, revealing photographs, Margaret's bruises, a prescription bottle with Emily's fingerprints, and a series of text messages that Emily had never sent, all from her phone. "I can't take her anymore. She won't be around much longer." Her breath caught in her throat. "That's not real. Someone must have." Vega's voice was steady, almost too calm. "Emily, we have witnesses who heard you argue with her earlier today, and the medical examiner's initial report says she died from blunt force trauma, likely from a blow to the head with a cast iron skillet found in your kitchen sink." Emily's mind spun. The skillet had been there since breakfast, when she made eggs. She'd washed it, but she hadn't touched it since. Fallon sat back, watching her closely. "So, help me understand. If you didn't kill your mother-in-law, who did?" Emily's lips trembled. "She did this to herself, or she had someone help her. She set me up." Vega's eyes narrowed. "That's a bold claim. Got proof?" Emily had nothing, no proof, no witnesses, just a growing pit of dread in her stomach and the memory of Margaret's sly smile. Fallon closed the folder with a sharp snap. "We'll be in touch." He and Vega stood and left, the heavy door clicking shut behind them. Emily was alone now, and for the first time, she realized that the real danger wasn't just that no one believed her. It was that whoever had helped Margaret, if anyone, might still be out there. The question was, were they done with her or just getting started? Emily spent the night in a holding cell, the thin blanket scratching at her skin and the cold metal bench digging into her back. Every creak in the hallway, every jangling of keys made her sit up, thinking maybe, finally, someone would come in and say, "You can go home now." But morning came, and instead of freedom, she got a court date. Her bail was set higher than she could ever afford without help. Ryan didn't come to the arraignment. He didn't send a lawyer. Instead, Emily's older sister, Claire, appeared in the back row, worry etched across her face. She managed to scrape together just enough money, pawning a family heirloom in the process, to get Emily out on bail. "Don't thank me," Claire said as they walked out of the courthouse. "We have to figure out what's going on before they lock you away for life." At Claire's apartment that night, Emily replayed every detail of the last few months. Margaret's strange comments, the missing items, the suspicious phone calls. Claire listened intently, jotting notes in a spiral notebook. But the more Emily talked, the more it sounded like a conspiracy only she could see. If this were a movie, Claire said cautiously, I'd think she was planting evidence. Emily's chest tightened. That's exactly what she was doing. But how do I prove it now that she's dead? While Emily tried to piece together the puzzle, Detectives Fallon and Vega were busy pulling apart her life. They interviewed neighbors, co-workers from her old job, and even Ryan's friends. The results weren't good. Multiple neighbors mentioned hearing shouting from the house on several occasions. One even claimed Emily had said she couldn't stand living with Margaret. Worse still, Vega found security footage from a grocery store 2 weeks earlier that showed Emily buying a heavy-duty mallet. Emily swore she'd bought it for tenderizing meat for one of Margaret's favorite recipes. But in the grainy black and white video, it looked sinister. The media started circling like vultures. Local news anchors ran segments with headlines like Caregiver or Killer, Daughter-in-law accused in grisly death. Reporters staked out the courthouse, hoping for a shot of Emily in handcuffs. And Ryan? He didn't return her calls. When Emily finally managed to catch him in her house, he stood in the doorway, arms crossed. I can't do this, Emily, he said flatly. I just lost my mom, and now everyone's telling me you. His voice cracked, but he didn't finish the sentence. Emily reached for him. Ryan, please, she set me up. You know me. I thought I did, he said, shutting the door in her face. That was the first time Emily felt true hopelessness. If Ryan didn't believe her, who would? A week later, Fallon and Vega called her in for another round of questioning. This time, Fallon dropped a new piece of evidence on the table. A signed, notarized statement from Margaret's longtime friend, Helen Carr. In it, Helen claimed Margaret had confided in her months ago, saying Emily had been stealing from her and hinting about putting her out of her misery. Emily stared at the paper, her hands trembling. This is a lie. Helen barely knows me. Vega's tone was calm, almost pitying. Helen also told us about a life insurance policy Margaret took out last year, naming Ryan as a beneficiary. If you were out of the picture, Ryan would inherit everything, including the house. Emily blinked, her mind clicking through the possibilities. Margaret had always said she wanted the house to stay in the family. But what if her definition of family didn't include Emily? Vega leaned forward. You sure you didn't think about how much easier life would be without her? Emily's voice rose. I never wanted her gone. She hated me from the moment I moved in. Fallon tapped the folder. The problem is, Emily, all the evidence points to you. And unless you can give us another suspect, the DA is ready to take this to trial. Emily's mouth went dry. She had no suspect, no proof, just a gnawing certainty that Margaret had planned this and possibly hadn't done it alone. And then, as Fallon gathered the papers, Emily remembered something. The night she overheard Margaret on the phone, she had mentioned a name, Tommy. Emily had dismissed it at the time, but now it echoed in her mind like a warning bell. The question was, who was Tommy, and what part had he played in Margaret's last days? Claire stared at Emily like she'd just handed her a loose thread that might unravel everything. Tommy, she repeated. You never mentioned him before. I didn't think it mattered, Emily said, pacing the small living room. It was just one night, maybe a month before she died. She was on the phone, whispering. I heard her say, Don't worry, Tommy. She'll mess up eventually. Then she hung up the moment I walked in. Claire tapped her pen against her notebook. If this Tommy exists and he was in contact with Margaret before her death, maybe he helped her set you up. We just need to find him. The next day, Claire started asking around in the neighborhood while Emily stayed low, afraid of being spotted by reporters. It didn't take long for Claire to get a lead. One of the Hayes' neighbors, an older man named Frank, remembered a man in his 40s hanging around the house a few times when Ryan wasn't home. Rough-looking guy. Frank said, leather jacket, tattoo on his neck. Saw him helping Margaret with groceries once. She said he was an old friend from church. Church. That sent Emily's mind racing. Margaret hadn't set foot in a church since Emily had known her. Claire searched social media for Tommy and Ohio and church, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Then she had an idea. She pulled up Margaret's old landline bill. Emily had kept a stack of her mail, thinking it might come in handy, and scanned through the call logs. There it was, a number that showed up multiple times in the weeks before Margaret's death. Emily copied it down and dialed. Using Claire's phone, a gruff male voice answered. "Yeah." Emily froze for a second, then said, "Is this Tommy?" Long pause. "Who's asking?" "This is Emily Hayes." The line went dead. That night, Emily barely slept. The next morning, she woke to find an envelope slid under Claire's door. Inside was a single photograph. Emily, taken from outside Claire's apartment window, sleeping on the couch. Scrawled across the bottom in red marker were the words, "Stop digging." Claire's face drained of color. "Someone's watching you." Emily's hands shook. "Tommy." It was enough to convince Claire that they needed help, real help, against Emily's protests. She called Detective Vega directly and told her about the phone calls and the photo. But when Vega met them at the precinct, she was cold. This photo could be a prank, and the phone number belongs to a prepaid burner. Not exactly proof of anything. Emily's voice cracked. "You think I took a picture of myself sleeping?" Vega shrugged. "I think people do desperate things when they're looking for a way out of a murder charge." Fallon, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Look, Emily, if this Tommy exists and he's connected to Margaret, we'll find him. But until then, the DA's office still has enough to put you away. My advice? Stop chasing shadows and get yourself a good lawyer." That night, Emily sat in the dark, staring at the photo. She thought about Margaret's smirk, the hidden notebook, the fake text from her phone. Everything felt like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite put together. Then her phone buzzed. No caller ID. She hesitated, then answered. A man's voice, low and mocking, said, "You think you're smart, don't you? You think you're close? You're not. And if you keep poking around, what happened to Margaret won't be the worst thing that happens in that house." The line went dead. Emily's blood ran cold. Tommy wasn't just real, he was watching her. And now, he'd made it clear, she was next. Emily barely slept after the call. Every sound in Claire's apartment felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the pipes, the faint rumble of traffic outside. She kept replaying his words. "You're not close, you're next." By morning, she had made a decision. If the police weren't going to take Tommy seriously, she'd have to dig deeper herself. Claire was hesitant, terrified, even, but she agreed to help. The first step was figuring out how Margaret knew him. Emily remembered the neighbor's comment about an old friend from church. So she started calling local churches, pretending to be looking for a long-lost relative. It was the third call that paid off. A woman at a small Pentecostal church in Westerville said, "Tommy? You must mean Tommy Larkins. He used to come around a few years back, before he fell on hard times." Emily's pulse quickened. "Do you know where I can find him?" The woman hesitated. "I heard he's living at a trailer park on the east side. But you didn't hear that from me." Claire insisted on coming with her. They drove out in the middle of the day, hoping daylight would make it safer. The trailer park looked like it had been forgotten by time. Rusting cars, broken porch steps, and peeling paint. They found Tommy's trailer at the far end. The blinds were drawn, but a faint glow leaked from behind them. Emily knocked. No answer. She was about to leave when the door creaked open a few inches, and a pair of sharp, bloodshot eyes stared out. "Emily Hayes," he said like he'd been expecting her. "You just don't know when to quit." Emily's throat went dry. "You framed me. Why?" Tommy smirked. "Lady, you walked into a game that was already in motion. Margaret wanted you gone. Said you were trouble for Ryan. I just helped set the stage." Her stomach churned. "So you planted the text, the fingerprints." He cut her off with a laugh. That was the easy part. The hard part was making sure she didn't get cold feet. Claire's voice wavered. "And what did you get out of it?" His smirk widened. "Let's just say your husband owes me now. Big time." Before Emily could press further, he stepped back and slammed the door shut. Back at Claire's apartment, Emily's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ryan owes him now? That meant Ryan knew about Tommy, maybe even worked with him. Claire looked sick. If Ryan's in on this, you can't just confront him. You need proof, real proof. Emily agreed, but she didn't have long to think before she got a text from an unknown number. A little bird told me you've been visiting. I warned you. Now it's my turn. Attached was a photo of Claire's car parked outside the trailer park, taken from a distance. Emily's got twisted. They weren't just being watched. Tommy knew exactly where they had been, and he wasn't done with them yet. That night, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. She thought she heard footsteps outside the apartment window, but when she looked, no one was there. Still, she double-locked the door. She was halfway to sleep when her phone lit up again. This time it was a video. Her living room back at the Hayes house. Someone, likely Tommy, was walking through it with the camera, whispering, "Feels good to be home." Emily sat bolt upright. Tommy wasn't just threatening her anymore. He had broken into her house. And if she didn't stop him soon, she knew the next video might show something far worse. Emily's hands trembled as she replayed the video again and again. Tommy's footsteps echoed through the quiet of her old living room. The place that used to feel safe, the place where she had made breakfast for Ryan and sat with Margaret over endless cups of tea. Now it felt like a crime scene all over again. Claire grabbed the phone from her. "We need to take this to Fallon and Vega. This is breaking and entering." Emily shook her head. "If we give it to them, they'll say I staged it. That's what they've been doing since day one." Still, the fear gnawed at her. If Tommy had access to the house, what else could he plant? What other lies could he make look real? The next day, Emily decided to drive past the Hayes house herself. Claire thought she was crazy, but Emily couldn't sit still anymore. She parked half a block away and watched. Ryan's truck was in the driveway. Another car was there too, a beat-up blue sedan she didn't recognize. 10 minutes later, the front door opened. Tommy stepped out. He wasn't sneaking. He strolled out like he lived there. Ryan followed, carrying a brown paper bag that he handed over. Tommy opened it, glanced inside, and grinned before slapping Ryan on the shoulder. Emily's heart sank. This wasn't a casual meeting. Ryan and Tommy were working together. She ducked down in her seat as they parted ways, Ryan going back inside and Tommy driving off in the sedan. She grabbed her phone and snapped a photo of the license plate. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat at Claire's kitchen table with her laptop, running the plate number through an online registry. The name that came up wasn't Tommy Larkins. It was under a woman named Denise Carter. A quick search showed Denise had been arrested 3 years ago for fraud. Claire leaned over her shoulder. Maybe she's a girlfriend or someone who hides his assets. Emily's mind was racing. Or she's the one who handled all the paperwork to make the evidence against me look real. The thought made her stomach twist. If Denise was involved, it meant this setup was bigger than just Tommy and Margaret. It was an organized plan. The next morning, Emily got the confirmation she dreaded. She went out to Claire's car to grab her bag and froze. Tucked under the windshield wiper was another envelope. Inside was a photo of Emily and Claire sitting at the kitchen table the night before, taken through the window. Across the bottom, in the same red marker as before, it read, "Tick-tock." Claire's face went pale. "They're not going to stop until they shut you up." Emily gripped the photo, her fear burning into something else, anger. "Then we stopped them first." She didn't know exactly how, but she knew she needed leverage. Real, undeniable proof. And that meant getting inside her old house before Tommy and Ryan could destroy whatever was left. That evening, under the cover of darkness, Emily parked 2 streets over and walked the back alleys toward the Hayes property. She knew the side gate still had the broken latch Ryan never fixed. Her heart pounded as she slipped into the backyard, crouching low behind a garden shed. A light was on in the kitchen. She could hear faint voices, Ryan and Tommy, arguing. "Told you she's not going to back off," Tommy said. Ryan's reply was sharp. "Then make her. I'm not going down for this." Emily's breath caught. Going down for what? Before she could inch closer, a floorboard inside creaked loudly, and Tommy's voice got louder. "Wait, you hear that?" The back door swung open. Emily froze in the darkness, her heart slamming in her chest as footsteps came down the porch steps toward her hiding place. Emily pressed herself against the shed, barely daring to breathe. The footsteps crunched on the gravel, getting closer. She could make out the silhouette of Tommy's leather jacket under the faint porch light. He paused just a few feet away. For a moment, Emily was sure he could hear her heartbeat. Then a phone rang inside the house, and Ryan's voice called out, "It's for you." Tommy swore under his breath and turned back toward the door. The moment he disappeared inside, Emily slipped along the side of the shed, staying low, and made her way to the back door. She knew there was no time to waste. Pushing the door open just a crack, she peeked inside. Ryan was at the kitchen counter, pouring himself a drink. Tommy had his phone to his ear, pacing near the dining room. Emily's eyes darted around the kitchen, scanning for anything that could prove what they'd done. Then she saw it. A black duffel bag on the floor by the fridge, half zipped. Inside, a corner of something metallic glinted under the light. She moved quickly, sliding inside and kneeling beside the bag. She pulled the zipper back just enough to see what was inside, and her stomach turned. It was the cast iron skillet, the same one the police said had killed Margaret. But this one wasn't clean. There were still faint traces of what looked like dried blood along the edge, and tucked in the side pocket was a prepaid phone. Her hand shook as she grabbed her own phone and snapped photos of everything. Just as she was about to zip the bag back up, she heard Tommy's voice getting closer. Emily's body locked up. She shoved the bag against the wall, stepped back, and ducked into the pantry, pulling the door almost closed. Through the thin crack, she watched Tommy walk into the kitchen, toss his phone on the counter, and open the fridge. Ryan leaned against the counter, his face tense. "She's still digging," Tommy muttered, "and now I hear she was at the trailer park. If she keeps this up, we might have to speed things along." Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. "We don't need any more trouble. The setup's done. The cops believe it. Let it play out." Tommy smirked. "You're scared she'll figure out why your mom wanted her gone." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Don't start with that." But Tommy just grinned. "Fine. Your secret's safe. For now." Emily's mind was spinning. Why his mom wanted her gone? What could that mean? She didn't have time to process it. Tommy grabbed the duffel bag and slung it over his shoulder. Panic surged through her. If he left with the bag, she'd lose her chance at the strongest piece of evidence she'd found. She needed to follow him. She waited until the back door closed behind him, then slipped out of the pantry and bolted for the side gate. Keeping low, she trailed Tommy at a distance as he walked down the street to the beat-up blue sedan. He tossed the bag into the trunk, got in, and drove off. Emily ran back to her car, started the engine, and followed. Tommy didn't drive toward the trailer park. Instead, he headed out of town, taking back roads. Emily kept 2 cars behind him, her headlights low. After 20 minutes, he turned down a long dirt driveway and pulled up to a small, run-down storage facility, the kind with padlocked metal doors and no security cameras. Emily parked just out of sight and watched as he unlocked one of the units and carried the bag inside. A minute later, he came out empty-handed, locked up, and drove off. Her heart pounded. She had to see what else was in there. She waited until his taillights disappeared, then walked up to the unit. The lock was sturdy, but Claire had once shown her how to use a tension wrench and pick from an old locksmith video. It took her 5 minutes, but finally, the lock clicked open. Inside, the smell of old metal and dust hit her. She flicked on her phone's flashlight and froze. The duffel bag sat on a wooden shelf, but it wasn't alone. There were 2 other bags. One had women's jewelry spilling out of it. The other was full of cash. And on the top shelf, taped to the wall, was a small box labeled in black marker. Hayes Case Originals. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. If she could get that box, she could end this. She reached up, pulled it down, and opened the lid. Inside were photographs, documents, and something that made her knees weaken, Margaret's journal. Before she could flip through it, headlights swept across the storage unit. A car door slammed. A familiar voice shouted from outside, low and furious. "Emily, I know you're in there." It was Ryan, and he didn't sound like he was there to help her. Emily's heart thudded so hard it felt like it might crack her ribs. Ryan's footsteps crunched on the gravel, slow and deliberate, like a hunter closing in on his prey. She shoved Margaret's journal and the photos back into the box, clutching it to her chest. Her mind raced. There was only one way out of the storage unit, and Ryan was standing in it. His shadow filled the doorway before he stepped into the beam of her flashlight. "What are you doing here, Emily?" he asked, his voice low but shaking with anger. "I could ask you the same thing," she shot back, backing toward the far wall. "You're working with Tommy. You helped him frame me." Ryan's eyes flickered toward the duffel bags, the jewelry, the cash. "You shouldn't have seen this." "That's all you got to say?" Emily's voice rose, her fear hardening into fury. "I gave up my career to take care of your mother. I spent months being insulted, manipulated, and now I know why. She hated me because I was starting to see through her. And you? You were in on it from the start." Ryan stepped forward, his face twisting. "She found out I'd been skimming from her accounts. Tommy helped me cover it up. We were going to pay her back, but then you started asking questions. She thought you'd go to the cops. She came up with the idea to make it look like you were dangerous. Once you was gone, the house, the insurance, everything would be mine, and you'd be out of the picture for good." Emily's stomach turned. "So you killed your own mother?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "Tommy did it. One hit, quick, but we made sure it all pointed to you." Before Emily could reply, headlights flashed outside again. Another car screeched to a stop. Tommy's voice rang out. "Is she in there?" Ryan cursed under his breath. "Give me the box, Emily. Now." But instead of handing it over, Emily hurled the box past him, straight out the open door. The contents spilled across the gravel at Tommy's feet. Tommy bent to grab them just as another set of lights appeared, this time red and blue. Detectives Fallon and Vega jumped out of an unmarked car, guns drawn. "Drop it. Hands where we can see them." Ryan froze. Tommy hesitated a second too long before trying to bolt, and Vega tackled him hard into the dirt. Emily stood frozen as Fallon rushed past Ryan and scooped up the journal. He gave her the faintest nod. "We got your sister's call. She said you were heading here alone. Guess she was right to worry." Claire appeared behind him, breathless but safe. "I told them you found something. We tracked your phone here." Vega snapped cuffs on Tommy while Fallon read Ryan his rights. Both men were loaded into separate patrol cars, their plans finally crumbling. In the weeks that followed, the truth spilled out. Margaret had indeed orchestrated the setup, afraid Emily would expose Ryan's theft. She had called Tommy to plant false evidence and even kept a notebook to make it look like she feared for her life. But Ryan had made the fatal decision to let Tommy finish the job early, turning the whole scheme into murder. The journal, combined with a stash of stolen goods and recordings from Tommy's prepaid phone, painted a complete picture for the jury. Ryan and Tommy were both convicted. Ryan for conspiracy to commit murder and financial fraud, Tommy for first-degree murder. When the verdict was read, Emily didn't cheer. She just sat still, staring straight ahead. She had her freedom, but she had lost her marriage, her home, and the life she thought she'd built. Outside the courthouse, Claire slipped her arm around Emily's shoulders. "It's over," she said softly. Emily shook her head. "No, it's just different now. I'll have to start from scratch." She took a deep breath of the cool Ohio air. She'd been framed, hunted, and nearly destroyed. But she had survived, and now no one would ever be able to take her truth away again. And somewhere deep down, she knew Margaret had been wrong about one thing. People did believe her.